Hello, ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from the bunker still. Today we'll talk a little bit about John Updike and his story A&P. All right, so you'll notice from John Updike's lifespan, he was born in the 30s, died relatively recently, um, but so he wasn't necessarily a baby boomer. Okay, baby boomers were born, started 1946 was the first year they were born. That being said, Updike was kind of adopted by the baby boomers, um, for better or worse, and sort of wrote to that audience as they came of age. Got married the first time, their first divorce, their first jobs, and sort of mirrored their lifespan. So if you see when this story was published in 1961, that would have been when the boomers were just starting to kind of enter the teens, even late teens, getting into what we would consider the 60s of the baby boomers. I encourage you just to Google baby boomers and look at it. They're a cohort of people who are infinitely, my parents, okay, infinitely fascinated with themselves, and I think they invented everything. So the boomers are a lot, they think they're a lot smarter than they really are. and But they're also one of the first groups of people to actually have what we would consider a teenager. Before that, when you could work in the fields, you were working in the fields. Okay, you didn't have this extended adolescence where you didn't really do much and had all this disposable income. The baby boomers did. They came of age during a time of remarkable prosperity, television, rock and roll. Okay, so a lot of what we consider things for teenagers were sort of invented by the boomers. So anyway, I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole about boomers in and of themselves, but it's important to know that that's kind of the background of this story. Now, A&P, I encourage you to Google that place too. It was a real place. Okay, A&P. Well, I'll get to that in just a second. Let's talk about the time and the place. The time is summer 1961, somewhere in New England. They mentioned the Cape, so it's probably somewhere outside of Boston, northern Massachusetts, during the summer. And the A&P, it's not just a grocery store, but it's sort of like the grocery store. If you Google it, you'll find out it stands for the Atlantic Pacific Tea Company. And these days, when you walk into any grocery store, I don't care if it's Publix, if it's Trader Joe's, if it's Whole Foods, if you have $1 billion, or they call a whole paycheck, all of them look exactly the same, more or less. Okay, they kind of get you to go through the produce first. If you want milk, you got to go all the way in the back. So try going the opposite direction, through the cashiers. Kind of hard to do sometimes because they want you to go a certain way. Well, that's not just happenstance. Somebody had to invent that. Okay, and A&P is one of the first stores to actually do that. That puts the consumer in in the driver's seat, so to speak. Because before, you would go to the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, and get your couple things. You would never touch the merchandise. The proprietor would package it up, give it to you, and you went on your way. But the idea of having a buggy go around, grubbing all over the merchandise, that was a new thing. Okay, and then somebody had the bright idea to go, oh, people can buy more if they can put it in a cart. I know it sounds like obvious, but A&P is emblematic of that consumer mentality of mid 20th century America. Ding, ding, ding. And I'll tell you right now that you should be looking at a Marxist reading of this. Okay, it certainly has to do with class. Okay, if nothing else, what Sammy calls the customers, sheep and cattle, and treats them like they're animals almost. And think about what sheep and cattle do. They just amble around without any sort of they're not really known for their smarts. So at any rate, our characters are Sammy, okay, who is 19, single, and like we said in all these stories, our protagonist is always in some kind of a crisis, okay? Remember, this is 1961, okay? So a 19-year-old kid living at home with his parents is an unusual thing. I know today you can pretty much stay at the house until you're 25. If you have a good mama. My mama kicked me to the curb, sit there too long. So the idea of or even going to school, as a matter of course, these were not open to Sammy. Okay, the same way they're open to me and you today. So you got to look at this through the lens of 1961, not 2020. Okay. Um, and what class is Sammy from? Sammy tells us, right? He tells us right off the bat when he finally hears Queenie talk. He slides right down her voice into her living room, and all these people are standing around drinking, what do they say? Drinking drinks the color of water with sprigs of mint in them. But if people come to his house, his parents give him Schlitz tall boys or whatever, So he knows his class. Okay, he's certainly outclassed by the girls, which we'll get to in a minute. Stokesy is in the story mainly to show, to compare Sammy to. Okay, I believe Sammy even says that they're pretty much the same except for a couple of things. For example, Stokesy is married with kids, ding ding, a couple of years older than Sammy. But for the grace of God goes Sammy. Okay, Sammy sees his future in Stokesy. Think kind of back to Battle Royale. I keep saying Royale. Battle Royale, where the protagonist is I'm sorry, not Battle Royale. Sonny's Blues, where the protagonist or the brother, the narrator, is doing the right thing. He came back home. He is giving back to the community as a math teacher, and he sees zero fruits from that labor. Okay, he sees that he's not doing any good. So, in the same way, Stokesy is emblematic of the American dream. Here he is. He's got kids. Check. He's married. Yep. Probably has a car. Probably, and he's also a company man. He I believe Sammy says that he thinks he's going to be manager one day of the company. So he's doing what he's supposed to do. But how does Sammy feel about that? Okay, Sammy does not see any sort of hope in that. So that's one option to him, but he sees no good reason to do that. Okay, but he doesn't really have a plan B either. So, and we can't make up one for him. Okay, we know that today there's all these other options available to him, but at this time there just weren't the same number of options. Perhaps the service, to go into the army. That being said, I want you to listen very carefully, okay? We know in 1961 that Vietnam is coming down the pike towards anybody who is draft age, okay? There is no way in 1961 that John Updike would have known that. Nobody even knew where Vietnam was on a map, much less even heard of it in 1961. So yes, it is true that Sammy does run the risk. He's single. He's unattached. He's prime age for draft. He is probably going to be drafted, okay? But we don't know. We can't consider that because there's no way the author would have known that. Okay, kind of like Gatsby. At the end of Gatsby, when Nick Carraway says he's going to go back to Chicago and get into stocks. We're like, no, Nick, don't do that, because we know that the stock market crashed in 1929, but there's no way that Fitzgerald would have known that in 1927. It's the same thing here. Okay, don't read too much into that. Lingle, okay, is pretty much, he's the man. All right, he's the manager, but in the world of the story, he represents authority, the voice of the authority, the kingpins, policy, that sort of stuff. So think about Lingle in those terms. But the other group of people are the other people that we want to think about are Queenie and the girls. Okay, now we'll just call them Queenie and the girls because Queenie is the one that really matters here. Hence the name, ding, ding, ding. She's an aristocrat. Her name, he's calling her Queenie. Clearly, these girls are used to getting what they want. Okay, they're walking the wrong way through the store. They're barefoot. They're wearing their bathing suits. And by the way, again, this is 1961. You wouldn't get a second glance down here in South Florida today if this is what the girls look like. Pretty much anything goes down here now. But it is 61. It would have been inappropriate for them to be walking around inside the stores dressed as they are. So you got to go with it that way, okay? So what gives them the right to do that? Okay? Their class gives them the right to do that. And the fact that Sammy is sexually attracted to them, think, again, back to Battle Royal, okay? Those young men were being forced to look at that whore or whatever she was, the naked lady with the American flag tattooed on her. Okay, think about the metaphor of that. You know, she stands for the American dream, or the America that you're supposed to desire. These boys are desiring her, but they'll never be able to get her. Okay, same thing here. Sammy is attracted to these girls, but not to them per se. Once you pull the camera back, he's attracted to their privilege. Okay, what gives them the ability to do whatever they want to do. Because remember what he says. Policy is what the kingpins want. Everybody else wants juvenile delinquency. Well, why is that? Why? What is liberating about juvenile delinquency? You know, when you don't have to worry about convention. All right. So at the end of the story, when Sammy falls on his sword for these girls, why does he do that? I mean, the girls are gone. He knows it, right? He goes outside. They poof, like almost like they never existed. And you know, he says he's going to thought about how hard his life is going to be from here on out. You know, but is it really a bad ending? Is it really an unhappy ending? I mean, he needed to make a decision and leave this store. Okay, he did. Now he burned a bridge, but he kind of now he has to do something. Okay, so in a lot of ways, it's kind of an ambiguous ending because we don't really know. But once you kind of look, we've seen this stuff before. Okay, once you look at these characters, what they represent, how they fit together, how they react to each other, then you can kind of see how this thing is built and what's going on. Because what at the heart of this story is a rumination on middle-class bourgeois values that Sammy is absolutely rejecting. Okay, now if you look at what happened during the 60s, this happened a lot. Okay, don't trust anyone over 30. You know, and again, not everybody was a hippie, even though the hippies get all of the ink over history remembers them. Not everybody was like that. Only people in the coasts and maybe in the larger cities, but for the most part, it was generational. Okay, there was a big generation gap. They didn't trust their parents. Okay, age old, but at this time we had a war going on. We had civil rights going on. We had the feminist movement going on. You know, the Beatles' White Album. You know, we had a lot of stuff going on in the 60s that amped up this idea about these values that the parents represented and the emptiness that their kids saw. Okay, in a lot of ways, the generation that the parents of the baby boomers that were born turn of the 20th century, they represented a much more traditional view of how things were supposed to be than the baby boomers did, even if they weren't all hippies. Okay, so anyway, a lot of stuff going on in this story. So if you think to look at it, certainly I just gave you a couple of ideas between Battle Royal and Sonny's Blues and this story that kind of goes over the same ground. I do this for you guys so you can kind of understand that how some of these things can set up, so you can look at how these similarities and differences stack up for your comparison and contrast paper. You're welcome. So anyway, I will be talking to you guys soon. Please wash your hands as always, and see you later.